All right, we are live. Let me get things set up. I am here by myself, so it might take me a minute to get things switched around, and hopefully, we have some people show up, and then we'll get started. All right, we have one person here. Give it just another minute, and then get started. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started because I kind of grew up with the philosophy that if you're on time, you're late. So, for if you're new here, I'm going to give a brief introduction to who I am. Then I'll talk a bit about some issues that are important to many Iowans. There are no current questions in the discussion, but if you do have a question you'd like me to answer, you can add that to the chat and I will answer those at the end. And if you come in late, I will end up recording this and having it posted so you can always go back and see if there's anything that you missed. Before I begin, I also want to say I have seen some negativity around Facebook lately involving some of the candidates for District 51, and I absolutely want nothing to do with Facebook trash talking, and I do not condone any such talk. Additionally, the news tonight reported on threats to the Adam Steen campaign. We really need to tone down the rhetoric and act like the grown-ups in the room. I think that is one of the reasons so many people are disgusted with politics and are disengaged. I'm here to talk about my positions and why I want to serve the residents of this legislative district. That being said, my name is Teresa Perrin, and I've lived in the Rhodes area pretty much my whole life. I have deep roots in this district. My parents both went to school and still live in the district. I have several grandparents and great grandparents, all the way back to third great grandparents who lived in this district. I graduated from West Marshall and went on to get my BA in English with a history minor from Iowa State University and an MA in education from Viterbo University. And after 32 years of teaching, I am retiring in 17 days. That would be 12 more work days, but who is counting? That would be me. I'm also mostly retired from farming. Last summer, I sold my little farm to my nephew, but I still have an acreage with a small herd of goats, and I am very concerned about the state of farming right now. With rising bankruptcies and increasing suicide rates, we really do need to do something. I've talked a lot about both education and farming, so tonight I thought I would look at them as well as other issues from the standpoint of legislation that was proposed or passed in the session that just ended. This session saw a lot of bills about education, and of course, funding is the big one. This year, the governor signed another 2% increase in education funding. That again is less than the increase in the cost of living. Basically, it might be more money like the governor claims, but it's less purchasing power. This session also saw a doubling down on the school voucher program that takes public tax dollars and gives it to private schools with no accountability. These schools do not need to accept all students. They get to pick and choose who they let in. They can also do whatever they want with the money. It doesn't have to be spent on students because there is absolutely no accountability. There are no consistently reliable data to measure outcomes because there's no oversight of these schools. And we already have a system in place for parents to make choices about what school their child attends. It's open enrollment within the public school system. In addition to the voucher system depleting our state finances to the tune of $350 million next year, this session saw a continuation of focusing on culture wars with their proposed legislation. One bill, quote, prohibits school districts from discriminating against or punishing students for religious, political, or ideological speech and viewpoints. This includes during class, homework, assignments, organized clubs, and wearing clothes or accessories that display a message. End of quote. This was already in place with the First Amendment and the Supreme Court decision of Tinker v. Des Moines. But it plays on people's fears that their child might be discriminated against because they wear a WWJD bracelet. There were several bills that thankfully did not pass that focused on restricting access to libraries and books. Iowa is already ranked second in the nation for book bans, only behind Florida. As for farming, they passed the Iowa Farm Act, which is the first comprehensive agricultural bill to make it to the governor's desk. And this was passed with bipartisan support. And it does do some good things. It expands agritourism and value-added agriculture. It works on animal disease preparedness, and it adds help for beginning farmers. But I think we still need to do more. I've talked a lot about creating more diversity in our crops and actually growing more food for Iowans, as well as developing the infrastructure to process foods here in the state so that we are not importing 90% of our food. For a state that has some of the richest farmland in the world, that is just crazy. We can also help small farmers by enforcing anti-monopoly laws that are already on the books. In addition, they did restore some funding for monitoring water quality. It's not the direct funding that was previously cut. Instead, it's been rerouted to the DNR, and there have been other additions to water quality, including supporting conservation efforts like cover crops. It's largely continuing the efforts that have already been in place and largely ineffective in bringing down nitrate levels. And again, I think we need to move beyond monitoring to more decisive actions to prevent nitrates from entering the water in the high amounts we're now seeing. The two big issues the Republicans said would be their priorities this year revolved around the issues of eminent domain and property taxes. Well, by the end of the session, there was nothing that made it to the governor's desk for eminent domain. The current representative of District 51 once again went against what is largely a bipartisan belief that eminent domain should not be used for the benefit of private businesses. He sided with big business and voted against the rights of property owners. And I can assure you that I support limiting eminent domain. It's hard enough when it has to be used for the public good, but it's unconscionable to use it to benefit private businesses. The second big issue is property tax relief, and in the final 34-hour marathon to end the session, they did push through a property tax bill that had no time for public input or legislative debate. Here's part of what the bill does. It caps property tax growth at 2%, and that sounds good, but that does not necessarily mean that property taxes will go down because it has nothing to do with the valuation of a property. Those rising property values are what helps cause rising property tax amounts. If your property value increases enough, you might still pay more in taxes. The bill also changes the way schools receive funds from the Save Equity Transfer. That's that 1% sales tax that goes to schools for infrastructure projects. The changes mean that it will make it more difficult for schools to fund some of those critical projects and more dependent on the state providing funds for them to do so. In addition, the restrictions on raising money will severely hinder our small towns. They're already struggling to have enough income to keep up with all of the rising costs, and this will lead to cuts in services. It might provide a little tax relief in the short term, but it really does not solve the affordability issues or the larger problem of taxes in Iowa. The Republican-dominated state government has done everything possible to eliminate taxes in the state. And while that might sound good, The flat tax unproportionately benefits the wealthy and stifles the state's ability to provide necessary services. They continue to tell cities and small towns that they just need to live within their budgets while restricting the money that they can raise. The Republican suggestion is that towns, instead of saving money, can borrow money for larger projects and pay interest, which will end up costing them a lot more in the long run. Another bill that was pushed through at the end of the session was SJR 11 to amend the state's constitution to change from a simple majority to a 2/3 majority to raise any individual or corporate taxes. It was hard enough for the Republican-controlled Congress to get a 50% agreement on pretty much any issue. And now it will make it that much more difficult to correct course when the state's bankrupt. And that's only about 3 years away when the rainy day fund is depleted, because this is the second year in a row their budget is $1 billion over what they plan on taking in. In November, we'll see this issue on the ballot, asking Iowans to approve this change, and hopefully enough people will see that this is not a good idea and vote it down. That is probably enough of me talking tonight, but let me check, see if there are any comments in the questions. I do not see any comments, so if there aren't any other questions, we can wind this down for now. What is my opinion on the bill that changed county supervisor raises to go away from large voting to districts and no other counties? I don't know enough about the Story County changes that took place to really and truly speak intelligently about it. I think it's good to, if it's done by a population kind of a thing where everyone is able to have more access to supervisors, but I'm not sure what the rationale was behind that one. So I would actually like to hear your opinion on that one, since that one involves you. Anything else? All right. Well, I am planning on doing this again in a couple of weeks, so you can watch for the announcements, and I'll probably have to check out on that supervisor race a little bit more before then. You can check my website for upcoming events, and as always, I do want to hear what's important to you. So thank you so much for coming, and I'll see you soon.